Okay, so welcome to May 11th morning review session. Today I'm going to be talking about, come on in, I'm going to be talking about the Unit 2, kind of the colonization of the Americas by different countries. So specifically, I'm going to be comparing the English, French, and Spanish colonies. This is actually from a document that's in your Google Classroom that we posted, I think, last week. But I thought I'd just go over kind of parts of it and then expand on it a little bit. So we have, and let me just make sure I can see everything. So we have the English, French, and the Spanish. Okay, the Spanish take place. Make sure everyone can see. Most of the Spanish colonies are going to take place in Central and South America. Most of the French colonies are going to be in Canada and out in like the inner, what we call the USA. Okay, more like the Mississippi River area. And the English are in North American coast. Now, who is coming from these different places? For the Spanish, mostly they are not coming to colonize. Mostly they're coming over to get the resources of the Americas. So we have like the conquistadors. And conquistadors are soldiers. They're there to lay conquest on the population of Central and South America. A lot of times we'll have missionaries that will go to spread the gospel, to spread Christianity to the Native Americans who are living there. For the French, they're not really going there to move there either. They're more going to make money off of things like the fur trade. So we have traders and merchants. Farmers don't go to Canada. Protestants, which is a minority in France, they are not allowed to move to America. And so far for the French and the Spanish, we don't really have people who are moving to the Americas to live there, at least not large numbers. For the English, that's different though. We have a lot of farmers, traders, we have criminals. Places like Georgia did that. And even within the English colonies, you can even see differences between that as well, right? In the New England colonies, it's more community-based. More families are coming over as one unit. Whereas in Virginia or the other Chesapeake colonies, it's usually single men. So we have a lot more people meaning to stay here and live there for the English colonies compared to the French and the Spanish. The French and the Spanish are more using it as let's drain the resources of the colonies and bring that back. That's not to say the English didn't do that. You just have a lot of people going over to become farmers and community-based traders over in the English colonies. How they dealt with Native Americans. The Spanish required natives to convert. They would show up to a village of Native Americans and they'd say, okay, everyone here has an hour to convert to Christianity. If you don't, we're going to kill you all. We also see coming out of this the encomienda system, which remember was when basically Native Americans are treated like servants or kind of like slaves to work on fields of owned by Spanish conquistadors or traders. For the French, there were some missionaries. But really, they worked alongside and worked with natives. They had a relationship with them, especially for trading furs. They would make deals with the natives that they would have to go and, the natives would go and get the furs and sell them to the French. So they had a working relationship. In the English, they did not have a great relationship. There was a lot of land conflict between the British and the natives. You have things like Lord de la Warr and the Powhatan Wars. You have some examples of natives being converted or the attempt to convert them in things like praying towns. Another thing I want to mention kind of is the difference between New England and Virginia. I'm going to expand on that a little bit more. So for New England, we have a government based on town hall meetings. If someone lived in New England, you had a much higher chance of being a part of the government in New England than you did in Virginia. Now, remember, it is still very isolating and exclusive. It is for white men only. But in New England, if you are a white man, you had a chance to become part of the government, whereas in Virginia, you almost had no chance. You had to, it was more aristocracy, where if you don't own, if you're not one of the, 50 huge plantation owners, you have no chance of joining the government. So we have things like the House of Burgesses, which was their first legislature. But really, you had to be one of the big landowners to join this. For the economy, New England is more of it's a very diverse economy. There was some farming, but also trading. Trading is one of their #1 ways of making money. Boston becomes one of the largest ports of the Americas. Okay, trading all these goods coming from the continent over to Europe. Whereas Virginia is mostly cash crops. We have tobacco, cotton, rice, indigo between them. Virginia was typically Anglican. Remember, Anglican is basically the British version of the Catholic Church, where New England was more Protestant, like with the Puritans. Although there was some skepticism to the Puritan way of life, you might remember people like Anne Hutchinson or Roger Williams that didn't fit into the Puritan system and went off to Rhode Island. That was more accepting of any religion. This Puritan thought also was a part of why many communities moved to New England. The idea of a city on a hill was that the colonists would come over, they'd create a community in New England, and they would be a light to the rest of the world, not just to the Native Americans, but to Europe as well, of this is what a community should look like. This is what God honoring a community should look like, whereas the Anglicans didn't really have that at all. Remember, these are just a bunch of single men coming over, in many cases, just trying to make some money. We had a lot more indentured servants. Coming over in Virginia. Some came to New England, but not as many. Early on, the main labor source are indentured servants. Remember, these are people who are coming over to work for a plantation owner for maybe 5 to 7 years. And then after that time period, they're free to go. In many cases, though, after indentured servants are free to go, they continue to work for their same plantation owner. They don't have that much money or anything, so they can't go and buy their own land. We do have the first slaves coming to Virginia. It is a pretty small number. The first come over in 1619. The slaves that are there would be a pretty small population for quite a while. It takes until the end of the 1600s, more like 1670s, 1680s, when slavery becomes more a property type, chattel property, that's passed down from generation to generation. And so. Okay. I've talked a lot so far. Any questions about anything I put up here? Anyone from online or anything? Okay. So I'm going to erase some of this. So let's get into the 1700s. Let's try to boil that time period down. So by the time we get to the 1700s, we have North America, or the English colonies, sending raw materials to Great Britain. You know, if you want to finish the triangular trade, right? We have Africa down here. We have finished goods being traded with Africa. Finished goods are also brought back to the English colonies too. English colonies really are kind of discouraged or sometimes not allowed to make certain finished goods. They have to be made in Great Britain. So that way Great Britain makes the money. And then slaves are brought to the English colonies. Like creating this triangular trade. Now, if you notice, with the triangular trade, that means a lot of money is leaving the colonies, either leaving the money in the form of buying enslaved people, or with raw materials leaving, they're losing that money that they could use that raw material to make something and sell it. And so many English colonists start smuggling and trying to sell their goods to other countries like France or the Netherlands. Great Britain's going to try to stop this. And so legally, they create a law called the Navigation Acts, which basically says they can trade with Great Britain only. However, that takes a lot of enforcement and a lot of power to be able to enforce this. And so the British usually don't enforce this. This is called salutary neglect. Not really following the law, even though it's their law. They don't really discuss it. They don't really crack down on people. You have to be really bad in order to get in trouble for breaking the Navigation Acts. Let's see. Let's see if there's anything else I want to add before we get to. Enslaved people become more of a commodity. Unfortunately, it's hard to discuss people as property, but that's how it became. Enslaved people were treated as property that could be passed down from generation to generation. And when enslaved people have babies, those children are also enslaved. Enslaved people were subject to certain slave laws. In certain cases, the English would create laws trying to prevent uprisings. And so what they did is they patterned up a bunch of laws against the Barbados Slave Code. Which made a bunch of rules like enslaved people are not allowed to learn how to read. Enslaved people are not allowed to shoot a gun, or enslaved people are not allowed to assemble together in a large group outside a church. And so despite these laws against enslaved people being treated as property, many enslaved people would resist. I mean, you could talk about this resistance up until the 1800s. There are passive forms of resistance. So this could be something like working slowly, or pretending you're sick, or breaking a tool. Oh, I can't work today. But there's also active forms of resistance. This could be fighting and killing the property owner. It could be running away. Now, early on in the 1700s, we don't have an established underground railroad like we would later in the 1800s. At this point, if an enslaved person was to run away, it'd be much more difficult to get out of that system. That's one reason why Africans were used for slavery, because in order for them to return home, they would have to get a boat back to Africa, and that would be very difficult for them to do that. If they use Native Americans in slavery, it'd be a lot easier for them to return back to their home because it's on the same continent. So we have many forms of passive and active resistance. Okay, and we have a couple more minutes. I'm going to finish up by talking about the French and Indian War. Good morning. So you'll remember that the French and Indian War, it sounds like it's a war between the French versus the Native Americans. That's not necessarily true, though. It's actually the French and Native allies versus the British and Native allies. Their main fight is over control of North America. There are other fights that take place between the French and the British in North America in the 1700s, like the War of Jenkins' Ear and Louisburg. But this is the big one. We don't need to remember like the battles or anything like that, but the result of this is a British victory. It leads to the French leaving North America. It also leads to colonial unity, where the English colonies by this time are starting to unify and say, hey, let's work together for a common goal. In this case, fighting the French, but unity is unity, which is going to be important later. They also became more upset at the English, because the English think they're so much better than the Americans, and there becomes some upset feelings between the English and the colonists. Now, the colonists were hoping, okay, the war is over, the French are gone, let's spread out across the Appalachian Mountains and let's colonize that land there too. However, that's not going to happen because of the proclamation of 1763. This would not allow English people to go across the mountains into the like Ohio River Valley, because there's a lot of natives who still live there, and the English government doesn't want to pay for soldiers to protect the people who would be moving there. This creates more upset feelings at the English. Many colonists begin crossing over the border in violation of Proclamation 1763. And also this war creates a lot of debt. Creates a lot of debt. And the English need to pay that off somehow. So these are three big things. An upset feeling at the English. They don't feel like they're English. They're treated like second-class citizens. The Proclamation 1763, colonial unity, and increased debt. All of these things come out of the French and Indian War, and it's going to be long-term causes of the American Revolution. Okay, it is 7:50 right now. Are there any questions before we finish up for the day? Okay, Mr. Keel will be holding a review session today after school. I will be holding another review session in the morning on Thursday. Thank you very much.